Welcome to Reddit Reads r/ProRevenge. Our first Reddit post is from Deleted. Fiance left me due to my cancer diagnosis. I left her destitute. This has been 4 years ago, so the sting is gone, and my revenge has been had. Sorry if this isn't the right forum. We dated for 4 years and had what I thought was a great relationship. We were both well-established professionals who both owned homes in the same neighborhood and both with daughters in the home. Her daughter was 11 and mine was 16 when we met. We had actually planned to get married, build a house, and raise the two together. We planned the house build because she had recently been diagnosed with a neurological disease that would eventually put her in a wheelchair and need something ADIV-friendly. During the planning stages, I began doing landscape and construction projects on her home to increase the resale value. All in, I invested roughly $30 into the home. We had a contract that payment would be made upon the sale of the home. I produced invoices for each and every project, but never pushed for payment because of the prior agreement. Fast forward 6 months, we are looking at property to develop and finalizing drawings on the home when I began feeling ill. I couldn't eat, constantly vomiting and passing blood. I began noticing that my abdomen looked swollen, which was odd because we were both very clean eaters and were in the gym every day. So I went to the doctor and began having tests done. During this time, she began having small cognitive issues, and the stress of her current position was exacerbating her condition. After a month or so of different tests and a biopsy, it came back that I had a golf ball-sized tumor in my stomach and would need to begin chemotherapy. So I began chemo and radiation treatments, which made me expectedly so extremely ill. She was spending time helping around my place on the weekends and staying over more, to the point that they were both at my home more than theirs. At this point, I suggested that we go ahead and put one of our houses on the market and move in together until the new house was built. I have great supplemental insurance as well as a long-term illness plan, so using that coupled with the sale of one of our houses would push us through comfortably and help ease the financial stress on her. Shortly after this discussion, she became extremely distant. Her daughter wasn't coming down and hanging out with mine anymore. She had excuses for not getting together. She quit driving me to treatments and stopped staying over. She then dropped a bomb, a sentence that will forever be burned into my psyche. I love you, but I can't see myself taking care of someone this sick in the long term, and I don't think we should see each other any longer. In a text. It broke me, I won't lie. This was the first woman I had ever opened up to and planned a life with since my wife died when my children were 1 and 3. However, I tried to be mature about it. I forced myself to understand her position and to accept what I could not change. I calmly, the next day, gathered all of her things, packed them neatly, loaded them in my truck, and took them to her house to leave on the back porch while she was at work. Walking around the back and under the porch cover, I sat down a box and saw her in her back living room on the couch having sex with a man that she had introduced to me as a lifelong friend. I had dinner and drinks with this man and his girlfriend. We had gone on vacation with them as well. I never spoke of the incident with her and simply sent her a text later explaining that I would leave her things on my side porch to pick up at her convenience. I discovered 8 or 9 months later from his now ex-girlfriend that they had broken up due to him confessing that he had been sleeping with my S.O. Now I'm pissed. Revenge time. At this point, I had finished chemo and radiation for the time being and was feeling healthier. I was going through some much-neglected paperwork when I ran across the file that contained $32,680 in unpaid long overdue invoices, which were promptly sent to my attorney to begin lien proceedings on the home. It turns out that I couldn't have done this a moment too soon because she was set to put her house on the market. coupled with interest over the course of what was then 19 months overdue. The invoices were hefty. That, along with the agreement of settling them when the house was sold and attorney fees, left her with roughly $10,000 after the sale of the home and settling her current mortgage. She promptly had to back out of the purchase of another home and moved in with her oldest daughter, Sil, and 2 grandchildren. She also had to leave her job and begin receiving disability. I ran into her a little over a year ago, and she looked as if she had aged 20 years and was in the wheelchair we had talked about. We chatted cordially but briefly, and I excused myself and went on with my day. A few days later, her younger daughter called me and spoke of my running into her mom, and could we hang out sometime? I gave a vague answer, thanked her for calling, and again went on with my day. The ex then called me a week or so later and began apologizing for leaving me as she did. Again, cordial but short, I thanked her for calling and hung up. She began texting, and this went on for several weeks, until once she asked if I could ever see us rekindling what we had. I can't see myself taking care of someone so sick in the long term. Remember the box on your back porch, did you think? That lifelong friend brought that over to you from my house. Good luck to you. Goodbye. TL Drive. Girlfriend broke up with me due to me having cancer. So I ruined the sale of her home, the purchase of another, and left her to have to move in with her daughter. Then threw her breakup line back at her. I sometimes feel guilt over this, but not much and not often. This comment is from Norskjef. So this woman knows she is headed for a wheelchair, and she has a man that not only doesn't care, but is gonna help her have a home to accommodate a wheelchair and help care for her, and she dumps him so she can bang another guy who is cheating on his girlfriend. Talk about short-sighted stupidity. How progressive is her disease? Is she likely to die at an earlier age? This comment is from Spukjert. Her friend probably stopped wanting to be with her once she was wheelchair-bound. She lost her job and is on disability now, and thought that by rekindling with you would be better for her financially. This is some poetic justice shit right here. This comment is from Smegma Semelier. What she meant was, I don't think someone with cancer will be able to take care of me when I need it. She saw an expiration tag on his life and got scared. Figured she had to rope someone into taking care of her before she progressed to the point that it would be prohibitively hard to find a caretaker. It was super stupid. If I think in her mind she was actually thinking about the future, her future. Now a word from today's sponsor. Make sure to donate to my Patreon down in the description below to get early access to videos, participate in special patron-only events, and other goodies. Any amount of money is greatly appreciated. It makes it easier for me to make the content that I love making, and I know you guys love too. Now back to the video. Our next Reddit post is from Osserspitch19. Boyfriend of 5 years cheated on me, so I ruined his precious RuneScape account. TL Drive at the bottom. My boyfriend and I had met online well over 6 years ago through an online game by the name of RuneScape. He was 14 and I was 17, but it had felt like we had been friends forever. We both played the game very often and connected through it, eventually leading us to start a long-distance relationship. Things began to escalate as the years went on, and we began seeing each other in person every few months or so. We were about 1,500 miles apart. My job had prevented us from doing that, but we had finally set a date for me to move in with him in December of this year. Our relationship never had any serious issues, and I was more than happy to have him in my life as he was happy to have me. As I got older, I began to play RuneScape less and less, as work took up most of my time. He continued to play regularly, if not more than he had when I first met him. He could never really hold down a job and barely had an income, but I supported him throughout the years and even paid his rent from across the country after he moved out of his parents' house a few years ago. I never really minded it because he was a sweetheart, but we began to have problems. In November of last year, I couldn't help pay his monthly rent. I was short on cash after having to pay my own living expenses alongside car repairs and bills I owed to the state, and I just couldn't afford to support him at the time. When I called him one night to discuss it, he freaked out and started crying that he didn't want to live with his parents again. I tried calming him down and even suggesting that I could help him find a temporary job until I could start providing for him again, but he wasn't having it. He claimed his parents would abuse him if he returned home, which I know for a fact isn't true because him and his parents have stayed with me several times. They've given him the world. I eventually did calm him down, but he remained passive-aggressive the entire night, and we eventually hung up. Because I cared about him, I reached out to his father the next day and informed him that he would probably be moving back home after his lease expired that month. I explained how I wouldn't be able to afford paying for his living for a month or two, and if there were any local jobs, he could work in order to, make an income. Apparently, a friend of his father needed help managing a small warehouse for his business and was looking to potentially hire my boyfriend for the season. It paid $15 and was super easy lifting boxes, sweeping the floors, and taking inventory. I brought it up to my boyfriend that same night, and he was not having it. Not only did he not want to work in a shitty warehouse, but he didn't want to work at all. All he planned to do day in, day out was play RuneScape. I brought up a few other job listings I had found in his area, and he immediately shot all of them down as well. He then had the audacity to comment about how he thinks I should work harder and possibly work a second job. I kept my composure and simply argued against it until we eventually hung up. I collapsed on my bed and cried for a good hour or two afterwards because of the intense emotional stress I was under. Not only do I work 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, I'm also an industrial meteorologist. If I remember correctly, that's a lot more work than playing RuneScape every day and using my Hulu account. I really considered breaking up with him right that moment, but I changed my mind and decided to give him another chance. Looking back on it, big mistake. I messaged him throughout the night and we sort of made up, but I was still a little uneasy about the entire event. He had moved back with his parents by the time December had come, and I began to help him look for jobs while he wasted his life away playing video games. I eventually persuaded him to start working at a small retail store near his house, and he thankfully began to make some money. I would still buy him video games and transfer him money like normal, because I spoiled him and our relationship began to feel somewhat okay again. Last month, both him and I put our money together to fly him across the US to stay with me for 4 days. We hadn't seen each other in person since last summer, so we were both looking forward to it. He arrived and we had a great time for the first few days because he could actually take me on dates for once with his new income. Everything was perfect until I caught a glimpse of his phone's lock screen while he was taking a shower. "When are you gonna leave, Herrer?" the Discord message read. I could have ran into the bathroom and snapped his neck in that moment, but I kept myself together as best as I could without killing him. I had never felt so used, disrespected, or hated in my entire life. When he came out of the bathroom, I gave him a fake smile, but I genuinely hated him from that moment on. He could have dropped dead on the floor and I would have spit on him. I spent the remainder of the night watching him play RuneScape, and I remained very quiet. He took notice of this and asked me if everything was okay, and I lied and told him I was fine. When it came time to go to sleep, I let that fucker climb into bed with me, and he tried initiating sex because it was our final night together. I rejected as politely as I could without tearing his member completely off. He was disappointed, but went out like a light. Immediately after he went to sleep, I reached over and unplugged his phone and started digging through his messages with that girl. I feared that I had misinterpreted the message I had seen, but I was completely right after all. Not only had he been cheating on me, He had been doing so for nearly 6 months, leading me to believe that he hooked up with another girl directly after I couldn't pay for his living in November. I scrolled through probably 100,000 messages and wanted to vomit my insides out by the end of it. He had talked shit about me, claimed I was emotionally abusive just as he had done with his parents, and even sent this girl my nudes so they could pick me apart physically. When morning came, I had slept in because of how late I was up reading his messages. I woke up to find him on my computer playing RuneScape. It was like all of our relationship had been wiped from my mind, and he was now an evil stranger sitting in my house. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tear him apart and kick him out of my house onto the street, but I didn't. In fact, I gave him as much love and attention as I could muster that morning because I wanted to leave things feeling normal between us. I dropped him off at the airport, and we had a quick and somber goodbye before I left him forever unbeknownst to him. I drove back home as calmly as I could before crying my eyes out in a mix of complete anger and emotional pain. I ended up kicking my bed frame so hard that the wood split and I had to buy another one recently. If only it were his face. I wanted to break his heart by the time he arrived back home, but I wanted it to really hurt. I logged into our joint RuneScape account that we had made several years ago where him and I would work on training the same account and raising it almost like our baby. We had always joked that if we were to ever split up, I took my half and transferred it to my main account before taking his half and giving it away to random people throughout the game. Every last bit of it. Even items I couldn't normally trade away. I used a spell to convert the items into coins, which I then gave away as well. The bank was now empty. It then occurred to me that I had the credentials to his main account were written down in my desk, as he would frequently have me train his farming skill every so often. I didn't hesitate at all and logged into his precious 14-year-old RuneScape account. I immediately took all of the contents of his bank and sold it all on the Grand Exchange, a marketplace in the game. It took an extremely long time to clear out his bank. By the time I had destroyed everything, I had 4 stacks of coins totaling over 5 billion. Now, what to spend it on him? I wanted to waste his life earnings on the most useless, stupid thing I could think of besides him. I logged back into my main account to reach out to a friend of mine that collects massive stacks of burnt food. For the unaware, burnt food in RuneScape has no use. You can't unburn them, eat them, or even sell them on the Grand Exchange. They are, however, tradable amongst players. I've always poked fun at this guy for collecting burnt food, but I was now more thankful than ever to make his acquaintance in my revenge. I asked him what the most obscure, unwanted item was of the burnt food variety was, and he replied burnt spider. Lo and behold, he had roughly 6,000 of the item spider on shaft burnt in his bank that he was willing to sell me. Feeling generous with my ex-boyfriend's coins, I gave my friend a full stack of 147 billion coins, and left a very happy customer. I dropped the 6,083 burnt spiders in his bank, but still had about 6 billion coins left to spend. With the remaining money, I decided to treat myself. I went on to the Grand Exchange and ended up going on a shopping spree. The first thing I bought were 100 bonds. If you're not familiar, a bond in RuneScape grants you 14 days of Ingame membership. After trading all 100 bonds to my account, I now have almost 4 years of membership paid for me. I spent a majority of his coins on extremely nice armor and weapons, all of which went straight into my account. He still had about an extra billion, so I spent it on the supplies I needed to level up an expensive skill of mine. By the end of the afternoon, he was left with a measly 150,000 coins in his bank, all of which I gave away to a guy cooking pizzas outside of the exchange. Nothing was left, so I decided to pick up a pile of bones off the ground and leave it solely in his bank. It might sound petty, but I laughed for a while. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is so cruel. You ruined the tens of thousands of hours he had put into a game. Well, it was time he learned that I can be a bitch, a mean bitch. On top of spending every last coin he had ever made, I leveled his defense skill. This may not sound bad. In fact, it sounds like a good thing. I helped his account progress right well no. Unfortunately for my ex, he had what players commonly refer to as a pure account, meaning he never, ever dared to level his defense skill from level 1 in order to keep the lowest defense stats but have high offensive stats. Well, not anymore. Have fun with your permanent level 6 defense. Cycling through hundreds of possible forms of revenge in my head, I settled on getting rid of his house. It's quite an achievement in RuneScape to have a nice house of your own. In fact, he had one of the nicest I had ever seen in the game. In order to have built it, he must have spent well over a few billion coins. Too bad I had disassembled it all in a matter of minutes, deleting it all into cyberspace. And there's no insurance either. He's going to have to re everything with his non-existent money if he wants a new house. Bye-bye, Casa de Cheater. Scrolling through his friends list, I decided to act as him and pay a visit to his friends who were currently online and admit that I had cheated on my girlfriend and was fully proud of it. If his friends hadn't removed him by that point, I removed them. All of them. Lastly, to add a beautiful little cherry to this revenge-filled cake, I changed his username. You were able to change your username once a month on RuneScape, so I changed his to let everybody know that he's a dirty cheater. I obviously won't drop his username here, but I did the best I could to embarrass him with a 12-character limit. He should be able to reclaim his previous username in about 3 weeks, but if he waits too long, I'll be able to swipe it and slap it on a throwaway account of my own forever. He sent me a very hateful and aggressive message later that night, followed by pictures of him crying. I wrote him a sincere message officially ending the relationship. I don't plan on doing any of that. I just don't want to speak to him ever again. TL Drive boyfriend of 5 years that I had financially supported for everything decided to cheat on me and spread my nudes. I wasted his RuneScape riches on 6,000 dead spiders and completely trashed his 14 years of effort, leaving him with nothing to show for but a shameful username. Edit: wow, I really didn't expect this to blow up as much as it did, lol. To clarify, this post is referring to old school RuneScape rather than RuneScape 3. We met playing RIS3 but immediately put all of our focus into old school when it first released. He even transferred 90 of his RIS3 worth over to old school through bots and such, making this revenge even sweeter. So while his old school account is only 6 years old, as is mine, his fortunes were the collective effort of a previous 8 years on RIS3. Thank you so much for the Reddit gold. I don't know what to do with it, but I'm glad I've given you a revenge boner. This comment is from Panzer Camping Wagon. To anyone who's unfamiliar with RuneScape 8, 5 billion gold pieces in-game represents a real-world value of well in excess of 5,000. Edit: I assumed Op was talking about OSRS. I don't know the numbers for RuneScape 3. This comment is from Custodes13. Holy shit! To all those of you who never played RuneScape or don't know much about it, the sweetest part of this whole thing is the leveling his defense. He could get 8, 5 back. He could buy it outright, honestly. But you can't unlevel a skill. There is nothing you can do to fuck that specific kind of account harder than leveling the defense. If he wants it back how it was now, he has to start a new account. Quite metaphorically, the final nail in the coffin. Beautiful, bravo. Edit: to everyone asking why this is bad, a little explanation. In RuneScape, you have skills, as many of you probably remember. They are generally divided as non-combat farming, thieving, agility, fletching, etc., and combat skills, which are melee attack, strength, and diff, ranged, think, and archer. For the uninformed, magic, prayer, and hit points summoning was added in RIS3, but it's basically moot for this explanation. The total level of your character is all skill levels, non-combat and combat skills combined. Your character's combat level, on the other hand, is strictly determined by the aforementioned combat skills. The max combat level relevant to this conversation is 126, and you start off at level 3. So your combat skill levels are added together and applied through a formula with a curve, and that totals your combat level. So, in example, if I had 99 attack and 1 in the rest of my combat skills, I would be level 35. If I had 99 in all combat skills, I would be level 126. Now, why is this important? Because of how the wilderness is set up. To keep it short, the wilderness is a vast area in the northernmost reaches of the map. You have to cross a small ridge to get there, which is just a click check. After that ridge, there are levels of wilderness, which are laid out like latitude lines. Levels for clarity. The levels essentially act as a combat level barrier between players. Anyone can walk to any of the levels, but the higher you go in levels, the bigger the level gap between you and a potential attacker can be. So if I'm combat level 5 in level 1, a combat level 30 player can't attack me because our combat levels are too distant. If I were in level 25, he could. So, if I were to have 99 attack and strength, but 1 defranged magic, it's virtually impossible to not train HP. So it would probably be around 4050. I would have a combat level of 70, which is roughly the same as someone who has level 50 in all combat skills. The difference is I can hit him over 3s harder than he can hit me. I might only have 4050 HP points, but he can't possibly hit that high with melee, which is the default for, while I can potentially hit him for his entire health and fairly often. That's why it matters. The idea of an Onetif Pure and other similar type accounts is to keep your combat level as low as possible. That way some kid in expensive armor because he has the defense level to merit having it weapons charges what he thinks is a low-level idiot for an easy kill. Then no one who will easily shit on you like a combat level 100 can even attack you unless you go WAYYYYY out in the wilderness. The only other person who has a real chance is another pure, unless you put yourself in a bad spot. So, when she leveled the defense up to 6, it negated the entire point of the account and the annoyance of everything I just typed above, and it is completely irreversible, even if you have solid video evidence of a person hacking you and admitting to it. Jajix won't change it. You can buy all the money and gear back, but you can't buy back the time and effort over years that you put into your account, your original account, which a lot of players are very nostalgic about, even if they hated it being forced away to the necessary shisha which 3 eventually became. TL Drive, it's a account that is basically impossible to defeat unless you are one or as a result of gross negligence on the pure. If you ever played WoW, it's basically the same thing as a twink. Then you logged on, turned the XP back on, and gained 15-20 levels. This comment is from Jacoboy9. It's probably risk-free considering she said a 14-year-old account. Otherwise, even though the account might be 14 years old, the OSRS aspect wouldn't be. That was Reddit Reads r/ProRevenge. If you like this content, please subscribe and click the bell icon so you are notified of new uploads. We upload new videos every day. Also subscribe to our Patreon, as that will help us a lot. See you next time.